Okay, let's do it. Six shock. So, in this series, I'm going to be covering six shocking truths, possibly more, about losing weight naturally. And today we're talking about shocking truth number one, which is diets don't work. So, dieting is equals weight gain. So, the story behind how I discovered this, and actually, if you're not familiar with me, my name's Jules. I'm a food scientist turned health coach. And the story of how I discovered this was I actually read a book by Daria Rose, who has a PhD. And Daria's story is really interesting. So she she was someone who had struggled and dieted all her life and like struggled with weight. And she was doing a PhD in neuroscience, and she was like, I'm just sick of this weight food mess. I'm going, and she's like, I've got these skills of like learning how to read this literature, read the science, and so what she did is that she decided to just go to the literature herself and actually look at the research around dieting and food, thinking that she would come up with like the ideal diet and that was going to solve all her problems. And what happened was that as she looked at the literature, she actually found that there was no perfect diet, and that dieting in itself is actually the biggest predictor of weight gain. So that people who diet or who restrict were way more likely to gain weight in the longer term than actually ever lose any weight. And she was like, right. And so knowing that, she actually decided to take what she called a leap of science and just she was like, I'm just going to do an experiment and see what happens if I stop dieting, if I stop restricting, what will happen? And of course, what happened was rather than food being this struggle and her weight being this constant challenge, she actually got to a place where she felt really calm around food, which was great. But then what she also found was that her weight started to slowly and surely come off. And she actually, went past her old dieting goal weight and just got and actually solved this problem for herself. And the thing that she did was that she stopped restricting. So she stopped dieting, and that was enough to really change her relationship with food and to find this peace where she was having the best of both worlds. So she was eating like good food and feeling good about her body, and her weight wasn't a struggle anymore. So I read Daria's book, and she's actually since become a friend of mine. And then I actually applied this to my own life. And I had some other things that came up in terms of I was working with a mindset coach or working with a business coach who taught me all about mindset and the importance of our thoughts. So that was really helpful on my journey as well. And I was applying, I found that when I stopped restricting and also applied this, like the mindset piece to my relationship with food, like that made a huge difference. And I was able to get to this place of ease and calm because because I had started to be more intentional with my choices and started to listen to my body. So uh, my own experience reflected Daria's. So um, that's how the kind of story behind how I discovered this. So let's talk about like this shocking truth that like why diets don't work and why dieting is actually the biggest predictor of weight gain. And the reason there's quite a few reasons for it, but the biggest one is that when we're dieting and we're restricting, like there's the physical aspects of food and hunger that play into it, but one of the biggest problems is that we actually have there's a psychological component to hunger as well. So when we're restricting and telling ourselves we can't have certain foods or that we should be eating less all the time or even counting calories or doing anything crazy like that, what happens is that builds our desire for those specific foods that we're restricting, or it just builds our desire for food in general. And so because when we're restricting, we build this psychological hunger, that's why yes, we can do the diet for for a month or a couple of months or however, depending if you've got a lot of willpower, maybe longer than that, but it never is sustainable. Like it never works for the long term. And it's because all the time that we're in this restriction mode, our brain is storing it away, going, oh, we're in food scarcity, we're in food scarcity. Like, okay, as soon as we get some food, like, let's really go mental, because like we want to overeat. We're going to overeat because we want to survive. And so this whole psychological hunger piece is so key, and that's the number one reason why dieting doesn't work. And so when you understand that, it's so freeing, but also it makes sense that of course diets don't work. And the other cool thing is that when you understand this, you realize that any struggles that you're having with food aren't your fault. Like, it's not your fault that you've struggled, and it's not your fault that we are living in an obesity epidemic, because like we've been approaching it from the wrong, we've been told to approach it from the wrong wrong approach, and we're told to restrict when that actually impacts and increases the problem. So that's the number one reason why diets don't work, is this psychological hunger piece. But then there's also other factors that play into it. Like when we're dieting, it's not sustainable. Like we're following all these rules that someone else has impacted on us, and like, that of course drives us to want to rebel against the rules, of course, because like we're not robots. But also when we're following like other people's rules, it's really antisocial. And the rules around diets, they don't take into consideration all the other reasons that food, like that we want to include food in our lives. Like it doesn't include like nostalgia, like, that sense of connection you feel with the past when you like, if grandma makes you her cookies that you had when you were a child, and it doesn't let you have food for like celebration, like the thing that goes along with your birthdays and parties, and you miss out on like just the joy and the pleasure of food. So there's so many things that like we miss out on when we're restricting and we're dieting, and that make it unsustainable. It make it mean that we can't keep doing it forever. Like, and also like, it just makes it really antisocial. Like you can't just go to a restaurant or go when you're traveling. It's like, oh, it's like, it causes you stress. It's like, oh, am I going to be able to stick to my diet? And like, it's just not sustainable. So of course, with all those factors in play, of course, as soon as you decide, oh, okay, this is it, or you achieve the goal, and then you're like, okay, I can go back to eating like a normal person, then the weight comes back on and more. And you probably have experienced that in the past. And so like we know you actually, if you think back to your own experience, you have that knowledge and that data for yourself that it's true. Like, why dieting doesn't work. Like it actually does cause me to gain weight longer term. And so what's the alternative? Like, that's a big question, really. Jules, what is the alternative? And there's really only two tiny habits that you need in order to find this place of ease. And find this place of balance, because one thing that can happen when people stop, like they realize that diets don't work and restriction is a problem, then they go into this like, oh, well, I'll just eat whatever, and just go into this free for all of just eating randomly. And that often can like cause weight gain itself, because we're just, eating randomly, and we're not having any balances around the food that we're eating. And so that can cause like this pendulum can swing too far the other way, and that can cause problems in itself. So what we want to do instead is find this middle ground, find this place where we're not restricting and we're not in a free-for-all. And what that looks like in terms of your habits is these two habits of making intentional choices and listening to your body. And the cool thing is that when we make intentional choices, that's when we use our like the best part of our brain, it's called the prefrontal cortex, but the most evolved part of our brain. And I think of it as my naturally healthy brain. And when we use that part of our brain to make decisions, then we're able to like make decisions that feel good in the moment, but also make decisions that are going to feel good in the long term as well. So the other option is, if we're not making intentional choices, then what we're using is like a more primitive part of our brain called the amygdala, also known as like the reptilian brain or the emotional brain. And that part of our brain doesn't understand about the future and doesn't understand about future consequences. All it understands is seek pleasure, avoid pain. And so if you ask that part of your brain, should I have another cookie? It's like, yes, it's like, no, don't just have one, have 100, because it doesn't care about the future consequences. And it can't compute that, oh, if I have 100 cookies, I'm going to feel really sick later. So the way we get around this is by using our prefrontal cortex, using our rational brain to make those choices that feel good in the moment, but also feel good for us in the long term. And when you develop this habit of making intentional choices in that way, that's when you get to find this balance of including cookies in your life, having birthday cake, having brownies, having, if you want to drink, like having wine in your life, and but having it in this way where it's that there's no like net huge negative to it. So you're finding this balance where you're having a reasonable amount. And when you get to that place, when do you have this habit of being intentional with your choices? It just feels so good to be intentional. Like it's and because it feels really good when you're intentional, like when you like, yeah, it'll give yourself permission to have a bowl of ice cream, but you just have the one bowl. You don't go back for more and more. Like it feels really good. And that's when you do that, you want to naturally keep doing it. So it's sustainable as well. So there's so much joy to be had when you find this sweet spot. And the other habit that goes around it is like listening to our bodies. So what that looks like is like, instead of getting some external person to give you a list of diet rules or be counting calories or measuring, like actually letting your body help, like working with your body instead of fighting against your hunger, working with your body to help you decide how much to eat, to help you like to make choices around like the types of foods to eat. And then when you're listening to your body, like you kind of learn like, hey, it feels good to me. And then you naturally want to keep eating in a way that feels good to you, rather than if someone's giving you these rules of forbidden foods, that makes you want to rebel and it builds your psychological hunger. Whereas when you're listening to your body, you're like, well, I could have, say you've got a dairy intolerance. You say like, I could have dairy, but it doesn't feel that great. So I'd prefer to not. And then that doesn't feel restrictive. It feels empowering and you feel really good. So you get to find this balance. So yeah, listening to your body to determine like what food to eat, but also the quantities is really key. And that in my journey, in terms of becoming someone who felt in control of my weight, like just learning this skill of listening to my body, I had first tried it with, like, I'd heard about intuitive eating. I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. I'm just going to do it. And of course it didn't work at the time. And that's because I didn't have the belief and the mindset stuff on my side as well. So when I learned the mindset stuff of how to manage my thoughts and to believe that I could do it, that's when I was able to actually relearn this skill of listening to my body as well. So it's really, those two things play in together. So that, I know it may sound like crazy to you that there are only two habits that you need in order to find peace and joy and feel that sense of control in your relationship with food, but it really does come down to these two things. And I've helped hundreds of people in the Naturally Healthy Club, which is my 6-month coaching group, do that. So if you want to find out more about these two habits and how they can play out in your life, and if you want to find out more about how you can work with me in the Naturally Healthy Club, then definitely go to my blog. It's thestonesoup.com. So I'll put a link. There's a link in my bio, or I'll put a link with the replay. But yeah, go to Stone Soup and then click on the Naturally Healthy tab, and there's a video there that goes deeper into explaining how this works and what you can do if you want to take the next step. Okay, so good to see you. And I'm actually going to be doing a live. It's going to be Naturally Healthy Week. So I'm going to be doing more live streams this week. So stay tuned for Shocking Truth number 2, which will be coming tomorrow. Okay, hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, and